and welcome everyone. I'm very glad to welcome you this morning to the next edition of the AI Breakfast hosted on the AI Campus. The AI Campus is home to 1,500 people working in machine learning, over 100 different teams. And as I just told my panelists before, last year alone, we have hosted 300 events with 100,000 people coming on campus. And actually today is quite a special day because it's also the 4th birthday of the campus. So there will be a little celebration afterwards.
Congrats.
So welcome. I'm your host. I'm Adrian, founder and GP of Merantix Capital. Merantix Capital is an early stage AI investor. We invest in companies actually in 2 different moments. Day 0, which is when we start building a company with a founder through our venture studio approach, help them win the first customer and also build the team. And we also invest at day 1, which is when the team is already there, some level of traction is there, and we invest in pre-seed. But I'm not going to talk about Merantix today, so I want to talk about manufacturing. Obviously, that's why you showed up, and it's an interesting day. But before we dig in, I let my fellow panelists introduce themselves very quickly. Fernanda.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Fernanda. I'm VP at NGP Capital. We're a global VC investing in Series A and B companies. Industrial tech is one of our key focus areas. So there's I spend a lot of time in manufacturing, robotics, logistics, supply chain. And some of the investments we made was in Daedalus, that is building an autonomous factory for precision parts here out of Germany. I also invested in a autonomous mobile robot company out of India, selling to the US, moving material in manufacturing sites and traction in the US also, who is building an industrial co-pilot for predictive maintenance use cases. So really looking forward for the discussions.
Morning, everyone. Silviu is my name. I'm the CTO and co-founder of Deltia. We're a software company building solutions for factories to enable them to build more products with less resources. In that sense, we're scaling continuous improvement with AI and automation. I myself, I'm a computer scientist. I did my PhD in machine learning, have been in the automotive industry for about 10 years in the space of self-driving systems and robotics. Have seen my share of automation fails and learned a lot. And we're deploying this at scale with Deltia right now in Europe and US. Thanks for the invitation.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bosse. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Holy Technologies. We're a Hamburg-based company, and we're building a AI-enabled production system for composites. Composites is a very advanced material that enables us to build very light components, and we intend to make this much cheaper to lightweight much more in our economies and do this with a very smart and very efficient system to do so.
And maybe also before we start, a quick disclaimer here. Deltia is in the Merantix Capital portfolio. It's actually one of the companies we help building with the studio approach. And the really cool thing about Deltia is not only that they're doing really, really great right now and growing at a very fast pace, but also the day they were incorporated actually already had 3 paying customers that came through the network that we've built. And actually the day Max, Silviu's co-founder, called me and he was like, oh, the money's in a bank. And I was like, yeah, great. We have sent the investment. And he was like, no, it's the first customer who was so keen to work with us that they already paid in the bill. And also another disclaimer, I'm a small investor in Bosse's company as an angel. So now this is off the table. I wanted to start with the question that probably all of us had in our heads when getting up this morning after what has happened yesterday in the US at 4 p.m. in the Rose Garden. So my first question, the icebreaker actually, is what does this mean for you individually, but also for the company or the companies you're invested or working at? Bosse, you go first.
Start. Perfect. I take the optimistic view. I think it's an optimistic thing for us. What we see with our customers. So what we work with our customers on is essentially we do a lot of onshoring for them. So creating an optimized solution for the production in Europe instead of having to do this in China or somewhere else. That's many times the problems we solve. And so what this entire tariff war, now accelerated by yesterday's events, does is, of course, to reinforce this. We see that the sentiment is changing a bit. I think there's a lot of positive Europe first approach happening, and companies are looking for European supply chains in all this uncertainty. So I do think for us it will be net positive. There's of course a lot of uncertainty right now, and uncertainty is never good for anyone, even in this case. But I'm optimistic on that.
Do you ship goods or services to the US at the moment?
No.
And will you in the near future?
Well, we might. Yes, we might. So short term, I think it's net positive. Midterm, long term, I think that remains to be seen. But I think the events from yesterday, it's a bit too premature to judge what happens really in a year or so. And as we know, in our life as a startup, 1 year is a hell of a time. So that's a lot of prediction I would have to make.
What about you, Silviu?
Yeah, I share Bosse's optimism, actually. So we've already seen a decoupling movement. It's been happening for a while now. And what happened and what we've seen actually also in the US, but also in Europe, was a lot of reshoring. We have been faced with situations where customers were like, okay, continuous improvement and AI improvement is a great thing, but we're faced with a different problem. We have like people who have been working at Walmart last week and they now need to build electronical parts. Why? We're pulling out of China. Yeah, so this has been happening for a while. I think we're, from this perspective, and only looking at reshoring, more on the winner side with the way we operate, because we basically help factories to become more efficient, to remove bottlenecks, to optimize, and that's what's necessary. I mean, we have been targeting the shortage of skilled labor force also in Europe, and we think this will become more and more important with this movement. I mean, taxation wars are not great for anyone, but in this sense, at least from a Deltia perspective, we believe that the effect on us is rather limited. We do have customers in the US. We do ship hardware. We are hardware enabled, but we can source this hardware also locally in the US itself. So we're not necessarily affected by that.
And as far as I remember, you had plans to build a team in the US. What has happened to that plan?
Yes, so that's a very good point. The uncertainty around how things will develop made us rethink about when's the right time to actually build a team there. Uncertainty is never good, and we'll probably take a moment to rethink about when to actually start building a team. For now, we're going to operate from Europe, and we're going to service our customers in the US here. I think we will still do that step. The question is probably when and where.
And, you know, I also remember having a conversation with your co-founder after he got back from the US, visiting different factories, and he was like, hey, this is so amazing. This is such an amazing market for us, because the state of industrialization, the state of automation in US factories is actually way below the level that we see in Europe, which for us as an optimization company means it's a great opportunity.
Yeah, it's insane actually. So if we look at, and we actually see the processes, the production processes of our customers. We're involved, deeply rooted into those processes. We have seen processes in China, in Europe, and in the US. If I were to look at the US, there's a ton of things that need to be done to ramp up production at similar levels to Europe, but they are still paper-based. I mean, if you compare it to what we see in Europe, you rarely find factories in Europe like that. That's the common sense in the US.
And you know, one thing Trump said yesterday is, well, if you want to avoid tax, come and build the stuff here, right? So which means a lot of reshoring is probably also going to be sparked by what happened yesterday. Fernanda, what about you? How does this affect you or your portfolio companies?
Well, I mean, as an investor, you know, we hate uncertainty, and tariffs mean uncertainty to the markets, and that's why they're sinking. So I would say, generally, it's quite negative. But when I look at my portfolio companies, it's kind of a mixed feeling, because we have companies like Daedalus that have a very strong kind of European sovereignty thesis of providing precision parts to European manufacturers, kind of supporting them in this reshoring trend to bring their supply chains closer. So they see it as an opportunity. They also see, you know, the kind of geopolitical change as more spending goes into defense as something that will benefit manufacturing in Europe overall. But then on the other hand, we have companies, especially the ones building hardware, that they and selling to the US, that they will probably have to raise their prices considerably. So think of this Indian company I mentioned at the beginning, that they're building mobile robots, leveraging the India EV supply chain, and then they're assembling the robots in the US. So certainly their costs are going to get higher, and they're going to have to higher their prices. But then, well, at the same time, they think that this is probably going to affect all of their competitors as well. And in the end, the ultimate kind of impact would be on the customer. So I think, you know, just remains to be seen. But overall, you know, would love to at least have some clarity on how things are going to go moving forward, rather than this kind of change, daily change of expectations regarding tariffs.
Yeah, I agree. The uncertainty is what kills you as an investor. Now you could argue that you know, yesterday's event have brought a lot of clarity, I guess, because a lot of people, as we've discussed before, backstage, a lot of people simply didn't believe that this would happen to this extent, right? So there's still a lot of surprise in what happened yesterday. So let's talk about manufacturing and AI. AI, in my head, largely means two things: automation and accuracy. Higher automation and higher accuracy. Now, we have a full spectrum of, you know, assistant systems to full autonomous agents and full autonomous automation, actually. Can you give us a feel where your clients and your company stands on that spectrum as of today? Bosse.
Yeah, sure. So I think, so we're working with large manufacturers, OEMs, Tier 1 suppliers, but also a lot of Mittelstand companies that we talk to. And generally, I think the usage of AI agents even is definitely not there yet. Definitely not. I think there's very different problems, I think, that also should be addressed first. And I think so where we are, I think the chance, and I think it's very understandable. I think this is one of the theses that we have, which I think is very important. I think for manufacturing companies to implement change is just incredibly difficult, right? If you compare that to software companies, you have more people, you have much more, usually the same revenue, more people, you have much more processes. It's very difficult to implement this kind of change. And I think that is an opportunity to rebuild, right? So we can either help change or we can rebuild. And we take the view, and it's a bit of a contrarian view, I think, in the venture landscape, but to rebuild. So we intend to build the manufacturer anew, right? So we believe it's faster for many applications to redo it and start and design processes with the autonomous system already in mind. Because oftentimes what's always happening is that we take processes that have been done by humans for a long time. They are incrementally developed and improved and optimized. And that works to some extent, but there's a whole different level of efficiency that you can get, and also speed by which you can get there if you actually design the system, the entire system, for that, right? So the design principle. And I think that's a view that we take, and where we believe that's the faster way to actually achieving autonomous systems, because autonomous systems are just so incredibly hard, of course. And if you have no control over the design itself, it's even harder. Yeah.
And you know, being an early stage startup is always about getting adoption fast, right? Getting new clients fast and make them employ your solutions quick. What holds your customers back from going to this, you know, greenfield approach and basically doing things new from scratch? What is it that holds them back?
That's a good question. I think it's for one, it's actually the core expertise of the companies is usually not there. These are companies which are great for something else that they have done, right? They are great product designers. They have a great manufacturing system, perhaps for a certain product. What we are talking now is essentially it's a software problem. Building autonomous systems is a software problem. Many of these manufacturers are not software companies. It's a completely different way of working. Even the methods by which you work, the kind so it's very different. And I think it's also not just about hiring these people. It's a cultural thing. And I think it's a massive barrier there that we see, especially also in the composite area, where I think it's mechanical engineering. Like the composite problems were always addressed with mechanical engineering minds and by solving it with hardware and smarter ways of engineering. But yeah, having a team of software engineers attack that problem from a completely different perspective with the insight from compositing is something that is high risk. And in the end, I think it's high risk that keeps them. And there's lower risk investment opportunities that they can pursue that yield some return on investment. And this is extremely high risk, high return. That is what startups are for, I think. Yeah.
And Silviu, staying with that question of adoption, if you look through your clients' portfolio, which is quite impressive, and a lot of household names are in there, what kind of cohorts would you make if you think about, you know, the level of adoption of autonomous technologies in your client base?
So I think there's like the leading companies usually that are leading innovators within their product segment that usually are the ones investing a lot more in innovation, in automation in general. I think this is a smaller number that's to be expected in that sense. So I think if I look at the way that our customers are structured, these are usually mid-sized companies, usually still family-owned, who are able to do long-term investment and plan for strategic development. And I think we see a large contrast to the rest of the followers in the pack. So if I think in terms of what Bosse was also mentioning to the lines of the same question, introducing automation and especially revolutions in the rest of the pack, the other part of the group of our customers, is particularly challenging. Just proposing an automation solution would imply first analyzing processes, capturing data. And the first reaction when you go to a company, and I've been working for such a company, full disclaimer, I've been working for about 10 years for the VW Group in their research department and then development. The reaction, even internally, to, hey, let's automate this part of the line was, well, wait a minute. So I would give you my data so that you come and propose some solution. There's a lot of carefulness over there, a lot of fear that is being involved. And it has many levels in terms of losing jobs, in terms of losing IP and so on. So the stance that we take to cope with this type of companies is rather evolutionary, in the sense of we're optimizing processes for you. We're introducing, based on, let's say, digitization, a set of AI-driven optimization measures. Those are easier to accept, easier to understand, easier to introduce in the current culture of the company, because there are structures. I'm not speaking about the companies that have no such structure at all. There are such companies as well. But if I look at this middle tier of the pyramid, then the next level for us is since we're sitting on that pile of data that we're collecting through the digitalization process, is automation. And only then it is when one can, which is the second tier, if I might call it like that, the right time to also start introducing levels of AI-driven automation. Like, take this process here, what about, given the high fluctuation that you have in your processes and the high repeatability, replacing this process as you have it with one that's automated with this robot. It's a different approach, I would say, for different types of customers and cohorts.
For the ones that are slugging, you know, in my eyes, when there's a new technological wave, there's always going to be three groups, right? So one group is the one we as investors love most, which is new types of companies that emerge on this technological wave, ones that haven't been possible to build before. Then there is the second group, which is the incumbents who adopt quickly and learn and fail forward on this new technology, and therefore then are also positioned to kind of lead the change and still make it. And there's the third group, obviously, that is the companies that just simply don't make it because they didn't start early enough to adopt to these new technologies. We've seen that in the previous era of the internet wave, right? A lot of companies died. A lot of others adopted and are now doing super well. And then there's also the group of companies that was created. When you think about these groups of customers, how can you spot the ones that you think will actually not make it?
I mean, this kind of sends me to a pretty old book, The Innovator's Dilemma. Some companies die earlier and some die later, but all companies die, right? That's a reality, and we all struggle to survive. One thing that strikes me looking at this three-tier model is that companies who don't have the right culture are not able to adopt innovation in any way, and this is usually the third tier, are the ones who are basically continuously losing market, and that's what we see. And the main element or the common denominator in this third tier companies is their ability to not only innovate internally, I would even exclude that at the level that they are, but rather at adopting, integrating, and putting innovation to work. So in my opinion, those companies will not survive unless heavy transformation happens, which is very, very difficult, especially in companies that are not family owned. I think this is also a very, very important topic. Family owned companies, at least from what we have seen within our customer base, are the ones who are able to make big leaps with fast decision making, particularly reinvent themselves in a very short period of time. And we believe that those are the companies who more nimbly are able to react to this kind of changes in technological disruption.
I would just add one short thing. I think to me it's more clear. Like when I talk to the customers, I think there's two types of customers. In the group of customers who don't do so well, who struggle, they have some problems. I think there's one group that essentially says, look, we're not doing so well. We cannot take on new innovation projects, even though that might help us in the efficiency problem that we have. But we need to focus on other things. Innovation, not something that we currently do. And then there are the others, which are saying, look, we need to improve efficiency. We know this will take a few months, and until it's there, it will take time, but we take the risk in a situation of distress to change course. And I think that's in the end what it comes down to, that kind of decision. You need to take the risk. And I think it comes, in distress, it's always very, I think, interesting what companies do.
Which brings us to an interesting conclusion, right? Technological adoption or adoption of technology is not actually a question of the availability of the technology, but more of a kind of a cultural thing. Fernanda, I wanted to talk to you about thesis. You know, we investors always love thesis, right? So we love to think about the future and how it will unfold. And so what's your thesis on AI, autonomous systems, manufacturing, for Europe. And you know, you as an investor don't shy away from doing deep tech investments, right? Which is still something a lot of investors feel uncomfortable with. And I think they can just simply invest on the software side, and that will change whole industries. But actually, I think no. And as far as I can tell from your portfolio, you seem to agree to that.
Yeah, I love the question. If I look at how I think maybe manufacturing is going to look like in 10 years, it's probably in the same direction of the way code is being written today. So developers are kind of using the machines to code for them, and they're pretty much supervisors of the output. And I think, you know, in manufacturing, we're probably going to have software-driven, AI-enabled factories that are reconfigurable, that can be scaled up and down according to demand, such like as basically like digital platforms. And I think Europe has been very strong in high tech, high value products, you know, and I think, you know, if we think about this type of products, it's probably going to go in that direction. Whereas if we're thinking about more low cost commodity products, we might go in the direction of fully autonomous factories, really fully autonomous, as in dark factories, much like what China is currently doing. I don't know if you've seen, but China is now piloting some factories where there's absolutely no human in the loop, or at least like they want to get there. That's why they're calling dark factories. So no need for lights on or refrigeration or HR departments. But I think that's only possible in highly standardized outputs. And that's probably not the direction that Europe is going. Therefore, maybe not what I am most excited when I'm looking at startups right now. But just to give you kind of two perspectives here.
Talking about excitement, what kind of company would you like to invest, but you haven't seen so far?
Okay, that's an interesting. I wouldn't say I haven't seen it. Maybe I haven't seen it scale so much yet. So one of the big roadblocks, I think, for automation is data fragmentation or poor quality of data in industrial customers. Data is often very siloed. These customers have like a patchwork of new and old software, and I would love to see more companies building this abstraction layer between systems that can really speed up implementation of new technology. I just want to see it scaling. I think we have lots of people working on it. It's just a very complex problem.
So if anyone is building that company, come and pitch Fernanda, right?
Please do.
So how are we on time? Should we open up the round for questions? I think you've been sitting around here quietly listening long enough, so I'll throw over the mic to you. Who wants to go? Who wants to go first? Yeah.
So you said in Europe the manufacturing industry is already quite automated. They use quite a lot of technologies. How much value can you actually get by kind of automating even further? We talk about 10x more. Do we talk about 10% more? Like, where do we see the value actually from how much big companies, you know?
Should I say something to that? I think so. Autonomous production systems. It's literally. I think it's the most exciting thing that I will see in my lifetime. I think the idea that I can build physical parts like ChatGPT builds text right now, it's incredible, right? And I think what will happen if you look at these manufacturing costs, right? The largest cost driver is always people, FTEs, right? And that will, and you see this already now that also in the software world, right? With all the AI assistants that companies get much leaner, right? They get to 1 million ARR with, I don't know, 2 people now. And the same thing is happening in manufacturing. And that is, so essentially you can, the total cost of manufacturing, they decrease dramatically, because you need much fewer people in the line on the shop floor everywhere around, because the automation has less room to do anything else than what it is supposed to do, and it is actually learning itself over time. So you don't even need the loops. So I think that is going to be a factor. I think right now we have billion-dollar companies that have like, I think at least 350 people, 500 people, billion-dollar valuations in manufacturing. I would not be surprised if you have companies that have less than 100 people in 5 to 10 years, and that will increase the overall efficiency. It will also of course come down to the cost of components that will be produced, so that will allow for much more competitiveness. But the efficiency of manufacturing companies will change entirely, I think, of manufacturing companies that are using this AI enablement. And that changes so much, because that not only means the components can be cheaper, it also changes how fast they can scale. It has long been an obstruction of scaling. So I think it's going to be a massive, dramatic change, not just 10%.
I fully agree. If I may, just to pick up on the same question, concrete numbers. So we consistently, just by employing AI for process optimization, we consistently see improvements between 10 and 70%, on various lines. So 70% was actually not that hard to achieve, and that is just by working on, let's say, optimizing processes. But this is just the beginning. We're scratching the surface. Looking at the future and looking at how automation is understood today, companies use machines for high runner products, and they focus on those high runners. You need to build to output 50 million products a year, circuit breakers, who are not for data centers or whatever we're building. Then you have a machine that costs 20 million and will return its investment in 3 to 5 years. But if the market shifts, if there's demand for slight variations of that, adjusting that machine or building another machine is very difficult and capex intensive for such companies today. What you usually do is you have manual stations, again, skilled workers working and building those 200K products a year that you need for a niche market that may explode in the market of tomorrow. But this adaptability will change completely with AI-driven automation. That's what will become possible. Flexibility at no cost. So you won't have the high runners, but you'll have a high mix, and you can serve multiple markets without the costs of today.
With automation comes a little bit of a paradox, right, in manufacturing, because mechanical parts are much easier to get over time than physical parts. Like a valve is a valve is a valve, and you can get the same valve for 100 years and it doesn't change. When you start automating factories, you wind up with this continuous capital cycle, because you have to reinvest in new computing every 10 or 15 years, or you have to pay, an infinite multiplier to get the same chips 20 or 30 years later. In the US, for example, you have factories that still run on like 386 computers that they have to spend like $20 million a year to get the chips for those computers. So how do you think about, with factories that you invest in, the fact that the capital cycle is actually becoming much shorter with automation, because you can't really get parts for as long as you previously could? So an investment that previously would last 40 or 50 years now will last 5 or 10 years before it's completely outdated. So how do you reconcile that with depreciation being like on the scale that it is, to make sure that you can still get a return on your investment?
I think that's a very good point. We still gotta see how things play out. But I think, of course, we might have to replace compute faster, but we also expect a lot more output, right? A lot more efficiency driven by these capex investments that we're making. So I think, the one kind of the benefits should overcome the costs here. I also think that lots of companies are shifting from a capex to OpEx model, with the advent of robotics as a service, or hardware as a service. So customers are now, instead of spending 500,000 in a robotic arm, they're paying 5,000 per month for this as a subscription, and then their kind of contractor that is going to bear the software costs and the cloud costs and all that, and they're willing to do that because most of the value comes from the software, not the hardware anymore. And they benefit from updates and new features coming up. So I think, you know, we're just going to see a shift in expectations as we did before.
So if I may add to the same point, I mean, we look at this as if we want to fuel adoption, we need to reduce friction. And this is a friction point, right? Our customers ask, or especially in the beginning, asked as well, okay, so this hardware, when do I need to replace it? Because we are hardware enabled. So the models that we create, they run on GPUs, yeah? What we're doing is basically we put a lot of work, especially in neural network compression, running it on edge devices, making it available in classical, let's say, or in architectures that are, let's say, friendly on CapEx. However, we offer also leasing, rent-to-buy solutions to reduce frictions. So move into this as a service space, not only for the software, but the complete product. And I mean, you're totally right. We still see factories where the worst I've seen is a computer with MS-DOS. Yeah, these things still happen, and they do not have the infrastructure. They do not have the people to cope for that. But we see this also for machines. One of our cases is basically to monitor not only manual, but also automatic processes. These are machines, some of them have been bought 20 years ago. They still function greatly, but they don't offer a lot of data about what happens with micro stoppage, interruptions, and whatever not. Yeah, so I think the key to enabling factories to integrate AI is reducing friction by offering this kind of as a service models where the compute is on our side.
Maybe you can just pass on the mic, because I think there was another question. And then next is you.
A bit more of a high-level question. If you compare the industry of manufacturing to other industries like logistics, energy, whatever, how advanced would you say is manufacturing in adopting new technologies in general?
I think it goes to what I said before. I think it's maybe one of the slower markets out there, definitely. So because of the complexity that is involved, and I think that is the intrinsic problem with manufacturing. I think that it long has been, and I think it's also something that the German economy currently feels when newcomers come up who have rebuilt from scratch in much shorter time rather than the 100 years or more that our companies are around. And so yeah, it's very slow, and I think it goes to the point that I said before. I think compared to others, yeah, it's probably at the lower end of speed, which calls for, I think, new solutions that do the innovation outside of companies to push them and to make it very simple to adopt. That must be key, because yeah, it will not come from inside. I think that is clear.
If we have the time, just to pick up on the point. So I mean, manufacturing is not necessarily, it feels like the turtle of industries in terms of AI adaptation. There are a few reasons. Fear is one of them. I actually heard this quote: if your system stops our line for 1 minute, it costs 50K. Yeah, doesn't matter if the system is actually embedded in the line or not, but there's this fear that's embedded naturally in what kind of an impact such an unknown, not well understood system might have. And especially for, I mean, AI is still a black box mathematic wise, but also in terms of understanding for this kind of people, even if you cage it, even if you restrict it, it's really hard to understand. And then there's the fear of losing IP. That's the second question. And the thing that we as companies need to deal with when discussing with some manufacturing companies is, what if our processes are being transpired to the competition, right? So all of this obviously are gates that one needs to go through. Fortunately, once you meet these problems once and prepare your documentation well, then it's much easier to have such discussions and alleviate the pains. But these are pains that are less common for other industries, I would say. So that makes it a bit slower.
Yeah, I totally second that.
Hi, my name is Nail. I used to work for Arrival. It's electric vehicles manufacturer, and they come up with very cool concept called microfactory, and opposed to gigafactory by Tesla, and so basically productionizing like locally, like within specific markets, and basically we started with electric buses and vans as such, and Arrival was paying a lot of attention to the software part, and it was like a great thing, but the problem was that actually the market was not really software aware. Like in general, like what we've noticed is that like a lot of manufacturers, including car manufacturers, it's not just about AI. They were not really great with software in general, and um, and that was like a lot of companies still use like this bill of process by Siemens, which is a terrible software, but there is no alternative. And I'm not an expert, like for example, what's happening, for example, in China, like how they use software from that perspective. But I can see from their products that they are doing something right. And what I see in Europe, that something is wrong here. And I believe that something is wrong is related to software rather than hardware. Germany used to be, from my perspective, the best manufacturing country, but it's not like that anymore. And I strongly believe that it's related to software and implementation of AI as well. And I'm not sure like if that thing is changing currently. Is like I'm not seeing that yet like in the market. But do you think there is a shift in that like mentality or in that kind of approach by European companies, manufacturers?
You mean a shift from hardware to software?
Mindset, yeah, like I said. Thank you.
Is there a shift? I couldn't say there is. I think not broadly enough that it would be significantly. I think generally, yes. I mean, that digitization shift, of course, has happened for decades now, and I think it's very out there. And I also agree with you. Like the first point is now digitization still. Like we're also what you said, like documentation, very thorough documentation is the first principle you need to have across everything. Otherwise, you can't do anything. And I think that already is a challenge, and still. Yeah, I don't see a shift, to be honest. I think that would go fast enough. I think I'm repeating myself, but I think it's so important. I think it's too slow. It might happen, but it's too slow. And what China does is they accelerate new ideas much faster than we do here, possibly can with capital and everything they have. That is the only problem. I think we have people who can do it. I think we have, great talent. All the industrial know-how that we need is here. We can do it, and we can also do it from a software side. But I think we need to scale it and just build new ideas. We just need to go away from changing what's old and trying to turn a big ship rather than building something new up. And that is something that China has been doing so successfully, right? And
if I may, I mean, this relates to your question regarding the different tiers of companies. I mean, Germany has a large history of manufacturing, and there's a lot of legacy coming with it. A lot of people, culture, tools, processes. They are not going to disappear overnight. Tesla is a software company who happens to deploy in a car. Companies, manufacturers, I mean, I've been working in this industry, and I hate to bash it, but the reality is if you open up a car and look at the car architecture inside, on a hardware level, it basically represents the org chart of the company. Every bigger department has a device in the car. If you don't have a device, you're not important. So you have to fight for your own device. It's not like a central processing unit with some redundancy and the rest is software, but it's still that old mentality that won't change overnight, that changes over generations with people, with engineers. If you build a new company today, then you have the chance to do that. If you're family owned and you want to do that because you won't survive otherwise, then you take radical measures and do that. But I think, at least for now, it will be very difficult, and this will lead to, yeah, loss of market share.
So we've got one last question.
One of the things that you shared is to, I think the goal of a startup is to get to faster adoption, to user adoption fast. And you shared that to get to that, we need to reduce friction in order to get to that faster user adoption. And then my question is, when it comes to software startups, what are some fundamental strategies or some good practices, especially to software, to get to faster user adoption and while reducing friction? Like how can we some basic things that we can do to reduce friction?
I can start maybe in a compliment, because I especially want to hear your thoughts about this, because so I mentioned that it's pretty hard to integrate or to implement lots of new systems into old factories, basically, and you need data for AI. So what I find interesting is that some startups are using off-the-shelf hardware to collect the data they need and to have maybe very light integrations with some systems so that they can work with what they have and they can get, to value, the time to value shortens a lot. And one of the companies in our portfolio who does that very well is Traction. So they built this sensor that is really cheap, simple. They give the sensor away, so to say, in the subscription for the customer. And with the sensor collects vibration data in the machines. And with that, they can understand the risk of the machine breaking down, right? So you basically completely or almost completely remove friction from the process of 6 to 12 months implementation into the ERPs and needing resources from their engineering teams to build this up, and rather kind of find a short path to value. And I think that's one way of doing that.
I fully agree. I think it's the golden way. Run away from integration as fast as possible, as early as you are in the game. Later, integration can be beneficial, but the earlier you need to integrate with the systems, MES, ERP, whatever not, BDE, and so on, of a factory, the longer it will take. You will have to fight your ways through a ton of IT projects and discussions and do ISO certifications and do things that actually will distract you from value creation. So if you have the chance, keep it completely separate. We started by selling a product that only required electricity. We integrated with nothing. We didn't even require internet. The first meeting that we had with one of the paying customers, the one that sent the money first, was it was like, okay, but how are you gonna get the data out of the factory? You're serving a web app. And I was sitting in front of 3 department leads for the IT. One wanted to discuss with me about cybersecurity. The other one wanted to discuss about TZAX and the impact on their customers' products and so on. So I said, well, we don't need to integrate with your intranet. We don't need you. And I said, but how do you get out? Yeah, we put a Starlink antenna on your factory. It's a completely separate network. It doesn't have anything to do with you. One guy said, oh, okay, meeting over. That's the only way you can do progress fast.
You just saved 12 months there.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for coming up, and please enjoy the breakfast.